The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website at agingpartners@lincoln.ne.gov.
I'm Kristen Stowes. Please join me as I talk with Wendy Tritle of Organize by Design. We will learn how to right-size our homes.
Hi, I'm Tim Francis, and today on Live and Learn, we're going to discuss hospice care.
I'm Tom White, and today we'll be discussing how older adults can protect themselves against financial abuse. We'll be talking with Velvet Hoskins from Aging Partners.
I'm Sam Truax, and today we'll be discussing the Nebraska Army National Guard with retired Adjutant General Major General Roger Lemke.
These guests and more on today's Live and Learn.
Do you feel that clutter is taking over your life? I'm Kristen Stowes, and today we are going to get organized with Wendy Tritle of Organize by Design. Welcome, Wendy. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This is an area I think that everyone struggles with at some time or another. Although your degree is in interior design, you have found a real niche in helping people get organized. How did that happen?
Well, actually, I started 15 years ago, and I went to college for interior design. I came to Lincoln to be a furniture sales and account manager, and found that when I went out to people's spaces that you could sell them furniture, but they still had some problems with them putting them into place. So I started helping people organize their offices, their desks, their communication with other employees, and then it led to helping the elderly downsize, to organize their space so it's more functional and you can allow more time for things that you need to do.
Yes, I can understand that. I think this scenario of organization can play itself out in many different ways. Sometimes we need to downsize because we're moving into a smaller space, but sometimes we just need to right-size the space that we're in. Yeah, so how do we start this process?
Well, usually when I go out and do an organization session, I will have 5 different categories where I talk about that we're going to have donation and trash be one of our biggest areas, and then recycle and shred, and then things to put away and things to go through, so homework for people to use after I leave. But if you're going to organize for yourself, I just tell people you got to dig right into it, start from left to right, and really have the mindset that you want to minimize, to simplify your life, so you don't have so much clutter. Today, in advertising in different areas, we just feel we're just overwhelmed, and we're cluttering our homes, we're cluttering our lives, and then we're cluttering our heads. And so it's very hard for people to think that they need to get rid of when we're always promoted that we should have more items that will be better for us.
Yes, I understand that, certainly. Are there guidelines in deciding what to keep?
That's always a hard question because people have different needs. Sometimes people want to save things for memories, and I always say if you have the memory, then that's one thing. When you go through a closet, sometimes it's do you really need 150 shirts? Are you going to really use all of those items for one season? So I always say just keep the things that you really are using that you're going to use in the next year.
And it's interesting, you bring up a closet. We have a picture here on screen. Tell us just a little bit about filling that closet with only what you need.
Well, I always say that your prime real estate in your home is your front closet. And according to the Association of Professional Organizers, that 50% of what you have in your prime real estate, your front closet, you don't use in the last year.
Oh, really?
So when you go through, people think they need more and more, and if you look at your home, 75% of what we haven't even used. So to downsize that is so important, and to take what we really are using I always tell people, have you used it in the last year? What's the importance of this? Will you use it again? And sometimes just asking the question of what they need is what they need to
have them
to figure.
verbalize that.
Right.
Well, one thing that I struggle with, how do you get the emotion out of the equation when you're trying to get rid of something that truly means something to you, but you know you don't really need it?
A lot of my clients, it's just talking to somebody and telling them of the memory, and then it's easy to dispose of it. Or sometimes I say, if you donate it, then somebody else gets to have that next memory. Or if it's just something that you just don't need, just to have the memory instead of the item. You don't need a house full or an office full of things that you have to manage to keep that memory.
And how about that just in case feeling? You know, I'll be just ready to get rid of something, and then you think, well, maybe I will use this next month or next year at the holiday season. I'll bring this out. What do you have to say to that?
When some people say that they want to keep it, I always have them explain to me what they're going to use it for, and then have them remind of if they use it. So if you have it during the holidays and you're using it, then yes, you can keep it. But if you have 5 crock pots that you might not be using, then you know, that's one thing, is that you can just take over your counters, take over your space, storage space with things that you're not using.
Yes, understanding. How do you identify trash from treasure? We have some wonderful graphics on the screen now.
Well, this particular case, there was as you can see, there's a lot of paper and trash. But, you know, even as food, it's expiration dates. We just go through and talk about with the client, you know, and sometimes it's just as easy as holding something up and then say, I'm never going to use it, and say, then it's trash. So sometimes it's people just want to talk about it and think about it, but then they can't really want to commit to that decision. So having an organizer helps them make that decision to trash it.
Sure. What do people tend to have the most organizational difficulty with?
You know, things that they have gotten from maybe a past of somebody that passed away, or they've gotten from somebody else that's important in their life. But it's mainly, it's not about the material item, it's about back to that whole memory. So I think people have a hard time with pictures, and I always say put it in a tub, or put it where you can go through it and look at it later. But that's some things. Jewelry, sometimes that's a hard thing to go through too.
Yes, that's very true. How about organizing your mail? I think you have a great suggestion for that.
Oh yes, mail is one of the hardest things for people to organize. The average person touches or thinks about a piece of mail 10 times, and they touch it only 4 times. So you think about how much weight that is on just a simple piece of mail. And I always tell people, create a station when you go out and get your mail, bring it in, take the papers off, and then just put it to pay the bill or to do something with, and then do it all at one time. So you're not going all over the house or all over your office looking for a stamp and an envelope, and it just seems so simple. And lots of elderly have problems with that because they say it just collects on my kitchen counter or my kitchen table, and we don't need any of that. Well, most of it is, 90% of it is trash.
Sure. Is it that we just kind of get used to things, get used to the piles, and we almost look past them? We don't even notice them?
Yes. Sometimes I say some people just get in their own mind, and then when they look at things and realize that it's out of control, then it's just overwhelming for them too.
Overwhelming. That's the word for it. After we get organized, how do we stay organized? Those are 2 different things.
Yes, and you know, as an organizer, when I go in, I tell them, you need to maintain this. You need to make sure that you spend some time dealing with it. So if it's mail or if it's even just a room, that it's easy to know what to do if you have a certain place. If you have a home for everything, everything should have a home. And I always use the example of kids in school age. We're blessed with the education that we have, and everything in a classroom has labels. So the kids know where the scissors are, they know where they keep pencils, they know where everything is in their classroom. And it's so interesting to me when you go in and organize a space, if you put in their pantry vegetables, fruit, and how people can see those really small labels, but then you have a big bag of bread there and they can't see the bread, but they can see that little label. So
Labeling would be
labeling
good.
is a great thing. I always encourage people to have a label maker.
Okay. Identifying valuables. Are there good experts to call in to help us discern what is of true value?
I always have a pile that's we're going to look into, whether we look it up on the internet. The internet is a great resource for material items. You can also call appraisers, but sometimes it's just that people feel that they have treasures, and then reality is that if they just pass it down, they always think that they're going to pass it down to somebody too. So that's good for anybody. If they think they have a treasure, who would you give it to?
Yes.
Or what are you going to use it for? And sometimes people think their treasures are so valuable that they keep it hidden, or they don't use it, which defeats the whole purpose too.
Right. Well, Wendy, what is the emotional benefit in getting organized and not having to deal with so much stuff? And I believe we do have a list to put up on screen that will elevate our thought process on clutter.
Yes, well, lots of times people feel as if their clutter, of course, is overwhelming and it's depressing. And according to the new statistics saying that there's death, divorce, moving, illness, and clutter are some things that go on in our world that makes us feel overwhelmed and depressed. And clutter and moving are lots of times hand in hand. So that big change in our life, it's just great to have somebody else there to communicate with and to go through things.
But to think of clutter in the same breath with divorce and death, I mean, in terms of being stressful, that's really amazing to me.
Right.
Yes, so it does wear on you. You have a quick, wonderful suggestion on old photographs, how we can start divesting ourselves of all of these old photographs earlier than we tend to.
It's amazing when I start organizing for people, because you go into, you go through a box and there'll be a couple pictures here and there. And then I just tell people, put them all together. And then when you have a holiday, whether you're having family over, just put it out on the table so they can go through it and have those memories, because those pictures are memories.
I love that. So we can actually attach those memories and have our children understand why those pictures are important.
And sometimes
Yes.
even to divide them up on whose photos would like what. So if you have a celebration, maybe somebody's going to have their 50th birthday, you kind of want those special pictures
Right.
associated with
Right.
that person.
And going along with that, I think we all tend to save items for our children. Do you have a quick word of advice on how to maybe take a step back from that process?
I always say, none of the kids want, if you are giving your items to people, they just want a few things of memories. Maybe
Yes.
it be some pictures. I always say it's so hard when your parents come to you and give you 5-6 boxes of stuff. It's just overwhelming of their childhood. So I always say, try to think of three tubs and put your artwork of your kids' memories in one, and then put memories that they want them, items
and then
that they
that
want
would
to
mean
keep.
more to them, really.
Right.
Yes, less is more.
Yes.
What is your one piece of quick advice that you like to end with?
Oh, I think you should always have live an organized life and have an organized day and really go through and think about things
Sure.
before you set it down.
Oh, Wendy, this has been a wealth of information. Thank you very much. We have your contact information on the screen for our viewers if they have more questions. And I know we also have an article in Living Well magazine this month. So look that up as well. And now, as we all get started right-sizing our own lives, remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
What does Medicare cover? How can I afford to keep living in my home? When I need help with house and yard work, who can I turn to? Why am I so tired? Am I eating right? Should I exercise? Where can I go for answers to my questions about aging?
Aging Partners is the place to call when you have questions on aging. Our experts are here to help you with unbiased answers for you or your loved ones. Aging Partners, we're only a phone call away.
Hello, I'm your host, Tim Francis, for this episode of Live and Learn. Today we're talking about hospice and hospice care. My guests today are Jean Walken with Tabitha Healthcare and Susan Berkey with Horizon Hospice. And we're going to have a good conversation and learn the basics of hospice, what it is, what it isn't, and how it works. Susan, tell us about Horizon and what you do and and the basics for what hospice is. And
Okay. Well, hospice is caring for people who probably have an illness that the doctors are saying, really, there's not going to be a cure, but we want you to be very comfortable. And so hospice focuses on helping those people with those kind of diagnoses to be comfortable, no pain, to have dignity, and to feel and be safe. And I think that those three things will help people, regardless of their physical status, have the best days they can have for the rest of their life.
And generally this is home-based.
It doesn't have to be, and that when hospice first started, it always was home-based. Now it can be assisted living, nursing home, all kinds of places. Sometimes patients move to their children's home or to a friend's house. So it's wherever they call home.
Jeannie, tell me how family participates in hospice care. Is there an ideal situation? Or what's the optimal situation for family participation?
Well, hospice, we treat the family and the patient or our client as a unit of care. So the family is just as important to us as our patients are. We use a team approach and have an interdisciplinary team. And from that team, we go ahead and we try and take care of everyone and support everyone. I think that hospice, people need to realize that we are there to support them. We're letting that patient steer the boat. And they're going to be the ones that are in charge of their care from now on. We're letting them make the decisions, and probably they haven't been making decisions for their health care or their lives for quite a long time. If you think of people that have been in a nursing home or have been in an assisted living, or even people that are in their own home but need a lot of care. So with hospice, it's end of life, yes, but we want them to have a good quality of life at the end of life. So what's on their bucket list? What can we help them with? What can we help the family with? With hospice, they also have to have a 24-hour caregiver, and I think that's one of the big misunderstandings that people have about hospice. Once they sign up for hospice, that means everything is taken care of. That is not entirely true. They have to have a capable caregiver that's there 24/7 with them, or someone that's available 24/7. Doesn't mean they have to be living with them, but we also need someone kind of at the end of life that will be there for them when they need them the most.
As available. Susan, are there, how do physicians participate in this? What's the criteria?
Okay, their physician would the patient's physician would always give an order for the hospice services. We need that. That's part of the plan of care to have that physician involved. Sometimes the medical director of the hospice program can take over once they're on the hospice program, but we do like to involve their physician and they will fax them or mail them the patient's plan of care. So we keep, that's a comfort to the patient to know that their physician that they've been with for years is still involved.
Still on the team. And is there a criteria to be met so far as insurance coverage and Medicare for hospice?
Criteria, well, that the doctor has to give that order that says if this disease, if this condition takes its course, that the patient has 6 months or less to live. Now, when 6 months comes, that doesn't mean hospice ends, because we can continue caring for that patient and their family.
But there would be an ongoing participation and review and
Yeah, as long as they're
assessment.
continuing to show a decline, and we have a APRN that visits them and does a face-to-face after that 6 months is up, and just to make sure that they are still able to be on the program. It is a Medicare-based program. That is the majority of our patients are under the Medicare hospice benefit. There's a difference between Medicare A and Medicare hospice. Once you go on Medicare hospice benefit, they give up the Medicare A, which is the hospitalizations, the skilled like rehab, like for hips and that kind of thing.
Things that won't be appropriate any longer.
Exactly, that wouldn't be if you weren't seeking aggressive treatment. And so there are a lot of insurances now that have a hospice benefit. We have a lot of younger people that are on hospice and can use their insurance benefit. Medicaid also has a hospice benefit. So there are a lot of payers, and from those payers, we provide the durable medical equipment, the medications, the nursing staff, the social workers, the volunteers, the home health aides to go in and help with bathing and companionship. So from that, we provide that holistic, encompassing care.
And I just want to say that I want people to know that they don't throw away or give up their Medicare A. Actually, what we tell people is put on hold or up on the shelf, because there are times when, even if you go on hospice, that you may want to go back to the hospital.
Or if you'd stabilize.
Right. And,
or plateau.
Or fall and break a hip.
Right,
you know, we don't want to say, you know, knock on wood. No, we don't want people to do that. But your A is never taken away. It's always put on hold.
Well, you have one or the other.
Yeah.
You have one or the other. You can always be
Step
revoke
back.
out of you're not stuck with it once you get on hospice.
Right.
So if you do fall and break a hip, for instance, you can go and be treated, and you get back on your Medicare A, and then you can come back to hospice when you're ready.
I'd like each of you to tell me just personally what satisfaction you get from the work you do.
Okay.
Address that for us.
All right. I really like the fact that when people, it's a challenge when someone comes to us and says, I want to talk about hospice, and I see what they've gone through. A lot of doctor's appointments, hospitalizations, in and out, a lot of medical appointments. They're at home or they're in a nursing home and they're really not very comfortable. Maybe they're having some pain issues. Maybe they're a little isolated because of their illness. And so the challenge I see is getting these people back and getting some TLC, having their pain managed, having a volunteer. We have a massage therapist that goes, and they're just getting all kinds of tender, loving care. And I think that it makes a difference for that family too, because it relieves them up of a lot of the things that were on their shoulders, of making sure that the patient took their meds, that their mom or their loved one had the equipment they needed. So it's really, it's kind of like you put them in this arms of tender, loving care. So
And
that's,
it's solve problems for them and
It's
make
solve,
things
yes.
easier.
yes.
Yeah, I think that healthcare in general is very confusing, and hard to navigate. So if you have a support team to help you get through that and provide that support, it's huge.
Being an advocate.
Absolutely.
And a caregiver.
And we have a team of people to do that. So I think that that is one of the biggest things. And people are scared. They're scared at end of life, rightfully so, because it's all unknown. That journey is individual and it's different for every person. So if you have someone who's an expert in that dying process and that end of life process, then they say, okay, so what's happening? What's going to happen now? And giving that reassurance that you are doing everything right, everything is okay, and we're going to be here. The really neat thing about hospice as well is our bereavement program, is that we follow those family members after the death of their loved one. We follow for 18 months, and so to make sure that they're doing okay and they're handling things well. So it's very meaningful.
I would imagine for many families, there's unfinished business that needs to be resolved or identified, or
Yeah.
we're just about out of time. I want to thank my guest, Jeannie Wolken, with Tabitha Hospice, and Susan Berkey with Horizon. And would you each just tell us again, just a little bit about your organization, and we'll post the websites for viewers who have more questions and how to contact you about hospice.
Sure. We're at 3883 Normal Boulevard. That's our office, but we go wherever the patient calls home. So you can call, you can talk to a hospice. You don't have to be ready for it. I say, you know, be informed if it's for your neighbor, for your friend, for your family. But get the information, and when and if somebody needs it, then at least you have a contact person. So that's what I'd like to tell people. Don't wait till the last minute and in a crisis. It's much easier if you can talk about it when there's not a crisis.
Totally agree. Totally. The process is so much better for the family and for everyone if we're not in crisis at the time. Tabitha Hospice is located at 4720 Randolph Street, and we are a 28 county hospice, so we cover quite a bit of Nebraska. So tabitha.org is our website. 486-8506 is our hospice number, but you can call Tabitha, get a hold of one of our Continuum Navigations. Anyone can make a referral.
Well, it's hospice has been kind of a movement for what, the last 25 or 30 years?
More than that, actually, in the 80s. So about 35 years now. So, but it's getting to be more, because I believe that the baby boomers are wanting to make choices for themselves. So I believe that people are really taking that back and empowering themselves to make decisions for themselves when they decide that this is what they want.
Well, anyone who's been responsible or participant in the decline or the passing of a parent, hopefully will have picked up a few observations and gained from that experience and apply it to their own circumstance.
Right. Yeah. So we don't want people to be afraid of hospice.
No.
We want them to feel that it's...
It doesn't hurt to talk to us. If they're not quite ready, we can still give them some information and support them.
And give them some authority and some authority over those decisions.
Yep.
Ladies, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm Tim Francis, your host with Live and Learn. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Tom White, and my guest today is Velvet Hoskins from Aging Partners. Velvet is the Lancaster Care Manager in Personal and Family Services at Aging Partners here in Lincoln. Welcome to Live and Learn, Velvet.
Hi.
Among the topics in the current issue of Living Well magazine is the topic of elder abuse, which can take many forms. You've authored an article in this issue which specifically addresses financial abuse.
Yes.
What are some of the different ways older adults can be financially cheated or taken advantage of?
Well, financial abuse is any situation that allows someone else to get access to your funds without your permission. Computer scams are very common, credit card scams, the financial world is much more complex now than it was when a lot of people over the age of 60, 70, 80 were when they were younger. And so they don't really understand all the avenues. And if someone calls or comes to their house and sells them a spiel or tells them that it's necessary that they give them information, they often do that. Often it's friends or family members. People need some help, some assistance. They're getting a little confused, or they can't get out of the house as often as they used to, and they need someone else to go to the store for them. They need someone else to go to the bank for them, or they worry what would happen if I died, who would help, who would take care of my financial issues, so they put someone else on their account, which is fine, but you need to be really careful and have checks and balances when you do that.
Sure. Okay, so can you give us some examples of the way that people have been taken advantage of financially?
If someone is your power of attorney, that really only means that they're allowed to have access if you allow them to, or if you are incapacitated. But oftentimes, if it's getting harder for them to perform those financial tasks, or harder for them to leave the house, or harder for them to negotiate bank matters or transactions, they just turn that over totally to the POA or a family member. And I would just advise that you should always be able to have access to your information, even if you can't do it yourself. If you ask them, they should be able to answer your questions. You need to have safeguards in place to know what's going on.
Yeah. And so in the article that you had in Living Well, that was a really interesting case. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Someone who needed help negotiating the daily tasks associated with finances because they're developmentally delayed and don't read or write, had a friend who they'd known for a long time, a neighbor, become their power of attorney, and that person over time took what the stuff we could prove was over $60,000 worth of money. And this is a very poor person that was a dishwasher all their life. So that was a huge amount of money to them.
So now how can what are some of the ways that people can protect themselves against this kind of, some of the other ways?
Well, I would say don't give any information out over the phone. Don't make any financial decisions. If someone is coming to your house or on the phone, or even if it's someone you meet socially, but they're pressuring you to make an instantaneous financial decision. We have a lot of seniors that come into our office that have signed a contract on a very pressure-filled situation. Well, they said I would lose this deal if I didn't sign right now and give them so much money. And so they just become overcome with anxiety, and they give them the money and don't really research it. If someone is coming and pressuring you, then it's probably not a good deal. Anything that can't wait a day for you to talk to somebody or ask someone or call someone or look on the internet to discover if they're legitimate, probably it's not that great of a deal. And if you need someone to help you with finances, then try to have checks and balances, so it's not just one person that's helping you. I mean, in other areas of our life, or when we were younger, we're always taught not to put all your eggs in one basket. It's the same thing with finances.
Sure.
Don't let one person have all that power. And if you are coming to them, there should never be a time when a friend or a family member can't come with you and say, okay, can you show me what my finances are? If they feel like they aren't equipped to understand their finances, then bring someone with them and ask that person who is helping you, can you show me what you did with my money? Because if they can't show you, there's probably a problem.
Yeah, there you go. So just transparency is really what you're talking about here.
And I think sometimes because if the person themselves, they feel bad that they can no longer handle their finances on their own, because generally that's something that we've done just like driving, as soon as we became an adult. And so they feel bad. And then they are embarrassed to ask someone else to come with them to that meeting with the person who's helping them with their finances. Or they're afraid that the person who's helping them will take offense. But really, if you set it up from the beginning that I want you to help me and let's meet once a month. You know, set it up from the beginning so that there's a third party involved and so that there's checks and balances.
So now for family and friends of an older person who may be being scammed, are there signs, are there things they can look for? How can they recognize that this is happening?
Well, I think anytime there's a major purchase made, it don't grill your family member, but the person who made it, just you know, how did you find out about that? How fast did you make that? How much did it cost you? You know, try to find that out. Sometimes, and I'm not an attorney, but I know our attorney has told people that you have so many days to rescind a decision that you've made. And so there may be a loophole if they've made a poor financial decision, as long as you're in touch with them and talk about it right away. Right. Or you know, you put a stop check on it. Or there might be some avenues that could be taken to alleviate that. Also, if that person doesn't know where their money's going, that's a big red flag. Either if they're handling it themselves and all of a sudden they have no money at the end of the month and they can't tell you where it went, then maybe they need help. Maybe they need someone to help them with their finances. Or if they have someone helping them with their finances, then you need to find out what the problem is.
So beware of vagueness. That's one of the things, is to watch out for that. So what are one of the more interesting things that you had to deal with with the financial abuse?
We've had people. I've had a client who purchased siding someone came to their door, and it was a very high pressure thing. They purchased siding on a house that already had aluminum siding. You know, I mean, it was in perfect condition, but they were confused and thought that they hadn't had it sided yet. And so then we had to try to get that contract null and void.
Were you able to?
Yes, our attorney is very good at that.
Good.
Plus, we have a great police department, and I have an officer that I work with very frequently, and if I'm calling from our agency and saying, you know what, I'm going to tell everybody I know that you took advantage of a little old lady, and then I have this officer call and say, this may not be illegal, but you're really pushing the envelope, and I'm going to tell everybody I know that you know, word of mouth sometimes can pressure them into
changing their ways.
Right.
That's great.
And then the insurance commission, they often try to pressure seniors into buying insurance, and there is an insurance commission to regulate how that is done.
That's good. Now, going back to saying that you have different people helping you with different aspects of your finances, what would you suggest, or are there some, not necessarily a specific suggestion, but like one person helping you with your checking account, someone else helping you with...
Generally, what I suggest to families, if they ask before setting this up, is it's better to have two power of attorneys. So sometimes they choose to make one for healthcare decisions and one for financial decisions. And then one that alleviates the pressure on the family member. They don't have this burden of trying to decide everything. And then sometimes they'll choose to put two people on as financial and two people on as healthcare, which probably is the best scenario, because if it really did come down to the person was incapacitated and you had to make the decision to have end-of-life things done, it would be easier with someone else to bear that burden. And the same is true with financial stuff. If God forbid they were in some sort of real financial trouble, losing their house, it would be easier if you had someone else to help make the decisions with you. And then just on a day-to-day basis, we often have people who handle the checkbook. So they're monitoring the checkbook, making sure the balances are okay, and then there's another person that handles the big financial decisions, and then they have a monthly meeting every month to see how things are going along. And that also gives the client some knowledge, even if they're at a point in their life where they don't really understand it anymore, they are included.
in the decisions, and
Right.
yeah, and so that they have that information. You had when we had talked before, you had talked about people who have been saving all their money for their family. Can you elaborate a little bit on that also, and what are some of the problems that might be?
Well, we generally, you know, we all want to do better for our children than we do for ourselves, and the people who are in their 70s and 80s now are kind of a special group of people that were that first generation that truly did better than their parents, and they really want to save all this for their children, and so they're not wanting to spend any money at all, and there are decisions that if they're wanting to save their assets, then we really suggest that they contact an elder law attorney, because there are ways that they're legal to save your assets that way, but they might be ways that would make it impossible for you to get on Medicaid if some catastrophic illness happened. And so elder law attorneys are very adept at knowing what the Medicaid rules are as well as what is legal.
That's great. Thank you so much, Velvet, for coming today and talking to us about this. My name is Tom White, and don't forget, it's never too late to live and learn.
I'm Sam Truax, and in my opinion, the community knows very little about the National Guard and what they do and who serves. So today on Live and Learn, my guest is Major General Roger Lemke, who is retired as the Adjutant General for the Nebraska Army National Guard. Now, General Lemke, I know you're now the Military Affairs Director for Senator Deb Fischer's office, which would be an interesting program in itself because of all the things that are happening in the activities in the Veterans Administration. But today we're going to concentrate on the National Guard. So tell us about the National Guard, General, and why don't we just call them the Army or the Air Force?
Right. Well, that's a good question, Sam. First, though, I've got to correct you on something. Actually, I was in charge of the Army and Air National Guard.
Yes.
And I say
right.
that because so often the most visible force we have, unless you look up in the sky, is the Army Guard that shows up for emergencies and so forth. But the Air Guard also plays an important role in protecting our citizens in the state and also from a national perspective. But a little bit about the history. Our National Guard goes all the way back to the forming of our nation, when our states, really, our military force consisted of militias that were formed and controlled within the state. And that concept of a state-controlled military force has stayed with this nation ever since. We've transformed since then, obviously. The National Guard is controlled by the governor when we are in what's called Title 32, but they can be activated and called up by the president to Title 10. And of course, most people are familiar with the activations and the departure ceremonies before our troops headed overseas to Afghanistan or Iraq. But generally, our National Guard troops operate under a Title 32 under the control of a governor, both Army and Air.
Yes, and I know there's about 4,600 or so guardsmen in the state, so it's a significant force, really.
It is, and I might add to that in the sense that of that, probably around 35, 36 rough numbers are Army, and the rest are Air. And just so people know, a couple of features on the Air side, the main unit, everybody knows the KC-135s here in Lincoln, but we also have a unit at Offutt Air Force Base that supports the 55th Wing in their surveillance and reconnaissance missions overseas. The other unique thing, perhaps, about the Guard that people should be aware of is we're not just Lincoln and Omaha. We've got National Guard readiness centers throughout the state. So when we have forest fires or prairie fires out around the Chadron area, we've got a National Guard readiness center out there that we can stage from.
Yeah, that's just an example of what kind of local and state concerns the National Guard responds to. So I know, for example, they've gone as far as Hurricane Katrina in their responses. So what kind of things do they do? They responded to Katrina. They responded to the forest fires in western Nebraska and many other things throughout the nation, really.
You bet. And the unique thing here, again, is that they're called up by the governor. So that we are first responders. That isn't true. To get national forces in is an entirely different process that can take some amount of time. As we look back on Katrina, folks remember that hurricane that hit New Orleans and was devastating. The Guard was the first military force to show up in Katrina. And some will call it our finest hour because many will recall that there was a period of days when there was quite a bit of confusion about exactly how to respond. But from a Guard perspective, we had our mission, we had the ability, and so we started putting troops and other resources down there immediately. One little story on that, one of the first capabilities that we placed down there came from our Air Guard. They fashioned up a training mission, basically, that we launched, and they landed at the New Orleans Naval Air Station. They took water, food, a number of things, and when they went, they were completely self-contained, which meant that they could unload the airplane and reconfigure the airplane to take off and come back home. So, I mean, that was within the first day or so of the tragedy down there. So that shows you the kinds of flexibility that our National Guard can bring.
Yes, and I know they've flown some drug enforcement assistance for the law enforcement and quite a few things in different areas of the country, even though it's all originating from Nebraska and your command, basically.
Right. One mission we had, it's kind of come full circle, was southern border. We had helicopters down in Arizona that were flying, if you will, border patrol missions along the Mexican-Arizona border. The thing I remember about that in visiting the troops down there was there was a place down there called Y, Arizona. Y, Arizona, the name of a little village that was there. So yeah, our missions can be throughout the nation at times if called, but we also do most of our citizen support here within the state.
Yes, give us
floods.
Basically, give us an example of some of those local things that we do. For example, Hallam tornado.
Yeah, the Hallam tornado was the one I remember way back when, and the thing there was the tornado hit in the evening, and the first thing that we responded with security forces in that area to help with local authorities basically secure the town, and also with helping to transport people out. But since then, we've had blizzards, we've had wildfires up in the western part of the state, which, by the way, we have in Norfolk, Nebraska, we actually have a firefighting unit with Army fire trucks, if you will, that can help support those kinds of efforts, in addition to our helicopters, which do the water drops that people are familiar with.
Yes, we do have some pictures of a water drop, and again, them patrolling there's a picture of the water drop coming up right now, and basically we have pictures of them patrolling the Pilger tornado recently. So one thing that was of interest to me is the Guard often gets assigned to patrol the highways during blizzards because Nebraska has one of the highest per capita blizzard fatality rates of anywhere in the country. So I guess people just think they're strong enough to go against blizzards here in Nebraska, or else.
Well, I think the problem there might be the fact that they tend to hit rather quickly, and probably catch a lot of people by surprise. You can, as we all know, you can enter eastern Nebraska through Omaha in nice weather, and by the time you get to Kearney, we can be in pretty bad shape. So yes, we've done many missions where we've had for accidents along the interstate, bad weather along the interstate, where we've assisted state patrol and local authorities. And again, by doing that, by positioning our people in places where they can help guide traffic and so forth, that frees up state patrol, local officials to do more important things, deal with accidents and so forth and so on.
Well, kind of as first responders, after 9/11, the National Guard was in there providing security for the airports until all the civilian organizations got organized. So.
And that brings up a thing about how flexible we are, because our force are citizen soldiers. They bring skills, civilian skills, that are just more than just the military skills that our soldiers and airmen would typically learn. So the airport mission was a complete surprise. We had never done anything like that before in our history, and we only had a few days to organize. But yet, We knew the citizens, we knew the communities, so we were able to get our troops out there and do that mission for about 9 months.
And we have a picture that comes up of the fact that actually they're in training all the time. The picture
Yep.
we have is their medical training,
Right.
where they're training in case there's a disaster and all that. It's interesting to me, though, that the Guards have served strongly in humanitarian efforts, even in Afghanistan, such as one of the units had to go to Afghanistan to train the farmers how to increase their production. So it's not just a combat role
Right.
that the Guard has. They have humanitarian roles as much as they do combat roles.
Right, those were agricultural development teams, and that was a concept that was developed within the National Guard leadership, basically in the mid-2000s. And we ended up sending a couple of different teams overseas to Afghanistan. And those teams are both Air Guard and Army Guard. We basically reached out to the expertise. We found soldiers that would have certain agricultural tilling type experience, those that maybe had dealt with processing grains and so forth and so on, so that when they got over there, they could help the Afghans develop and enhance those skills.
But do you find that the individuals who join the Guard are more dedicated to the community than the guys who join the Army and Navy? Because again, that's more national and the Guard is more local, so they might be more dedicated to in joining the Guard, more dedicated to the local communities.
We have a saying in the Guard, family first, job second, and Guard third. And that's not to demean the Guard, it simply says our priorities as citizens in Nebraska and family members is just that. So yes, I mean our members are community members first. And of course with that then, they bring along the training and the capabilities and equipment and resources that are needed sometimes to help support our citizens in times of emergencies.
Yes, and the Guard supports the communities in as much as many of the armories that you've mentioned are used for the Applejack Festival and festivals in the towns or meeting places in the town. So the community is also becoming aware of service to veterans. Veterans Day is in November, and many businesses honor veterans like Hy-Vee, Applebee's, and Golden Corral, and many other businesses have free meals or discounts for the veterans. But even more important, we need to have the local employees recognize what the skills are of those guardsmen when they come back or when they are done with their service, to know that an example is one of the unit heads was doing accounting and budgeting, and then he was assigned to recruiting, which is marketing, so he would come out of the service with a variety of skills. And so how do you believe the community is accepting the veterans?
Well, here in Nebraska, and actually jobs and veterans and matching our younger guardsmen up, especially with civilian job opportunities, has been a challenge with the economy being down for a few years, and it's coming back now. But really in Nebraska, our businesses and business leaders and companies really do recognize the value, the extra skills that our guardsmen can bring. When you talk transportation, since we have a lot of transportation in the state, National Guard, those translate very easy to support Werner and other types of truck companies here in the state. Medical is another one. Many of our young soldiers and airmen join to get those medical skills, which they can then basically leverage in the civilian community for good jobs. So I'd have to say that in Nebraska in particular, our business community knows and likes the kinds of soldiers and airmen that we produce for them.
Yes, and actually females serve in both of those capacities, as drivers and as medical technicians, and some of the medical technicians have even gone to Afghanistan.
Yes, and it's been a major transformation. When you look back to the 1990s, we were artillery and other combat related with very little support. That we transitioned more to combat support, which is your transportation. We continued with medical and others. Because of that, our female involvement has risen to somewhere between 15 and 20%.
That's great.
So transportation, we've had a couple of Bronze Star with Valor female awardees overseas in Afghanistan. So it shows you that we've really become a very diverse force here in Nebraska.
Well, Thank you, General Lemke, for your service to the state and to the nation, and also for being on the service to come on this program for us.
Well, thank you, Sam. It's been a pleasure seeing you again.
And remember, it's never too late to live and learn.